During my years in high school, my home featured an expansive backyard that seamlessly merged with an extensive forest. In our youth, my friends and I used to venture deep into the woods for exhilarating games. There was always a slight edge of danger that heightened our excitement. However, as we matured, we gradually stopped our forest adventures, deeming them purposeless. One day, while lounging on the couch with my friend Tyler, he suggested the idea of embarking on a nighttime journey into the woods. Initially, our plan was just a simple walk, but it quickly evolved into an ambitious overnight camping trip. Thankfully, Tyler mentioned his parents had a tent we could borrow, so we walked down the street and retrieved it from his garage. It's worth noting that neither of us had any prior camping experience, leaving us clueless about the intricacies of such an endeavor. Nevertheless, we brushed aside concerns since we were only planning to spend a single night out there. After packing a bag with various snacks, water bottles, and a portable phone charger, we entered the woods. However, our excitement waned when we realized that the flashlight Tyler brought was inadequate. It offered feeble illumination that barely reached a few feet ahead. While it prevented us from colliding with trees and shrubs, our visibility remained severely limited. In the first 15 minutes of our trek, we exchanged excited remarks about our anticipation and the eerie atmosphere. Subsequently, we walked in silence for another 15 minutes, captivated and slightly unnerved by the unsettling stillness. Occasionally, I thought I heard faint rustling nearby, but the weak flashlight beam failed to reveal anything. After our 30-minute walk, we stumbled upon an open grassy area surrounded by trees, an ideal spot to set up camp. Tyler ingeniously propped the flashlight on a bush, casting a modest glow over our surroundings, and we began the tent assembly process. Despite Tyler's claim that it was an easy-to-assemble tent, reality proved otherwise. We struggled with the tent for nearly an hour, desperately trying to keep it from collapsing. To make matters worse, every time we heard a suspicious noise, we had to grab the flashlight, scan the area, and then go back to our futile struggle with the tent. Personally, I started regretting our decision to enter the woods at this point. However, once we finally managed to set up the tent, our stress levels decreased. We settled inside, embracing the symphony of woodland sounds. Moments of complete silence alternated with the melodious chirping of birds and occasional animal noises, creating a mesmerizing experience. Unfortunately, our enchantment turned to unease when we both recognized a familiar sound, the distinct footsteps of another human. Huddled inside the tent, we listened intently as the footsteps moved around the nearby trees. Although they didn't seem to be getting closer, their presence indicated another person, not an animal. After a minute or so, the footsteps faded, leaving us in tense silence. Convinced that the person had left, we cautiously emerged from the tent, choosing to sit outside instead. Feeling vulnerable inside the tent, our conversation continued as we closely watched our surroundings. To our dismay, the sound of footsteps returned from the distance, steadily getting closer with each passing moment. Eventually, they came uncomfortably close, sparking concerns that the person might be approaching us directly. Reacting quickly, Tyler aimed the flashlight at the source of the sound, but the footsteps persisted. Slowly, they advanced toward us until we expected the person to enter the flashlight's beam. However, they abruptly stopped just beyond the light's reach. Tyler and I found ourselves frozen, fixated on the darkness shrouding the figure. Then, with one step backward, the footsteps retreated, fading into the night. A minute later, the sound vanished entirely, restoring an eerie stillness to the woods. Seizing the opportunity, we quickly took down the tent and hastily left the area, consumed by fear and unease. We were so shaken that we accidentally strayed from the correct path, ending up on a neighboring street. Exhausted but unable to sleep, we spent the entire night in my room, engaged in a troubling discussion about the unfolding events and the potential dangers that awaited us. Since that night, we vowed to never enter those woods again. Even today, I keep my distance from isolated areas, haunted by the thought that the person we encountered that fateful night might have had malicious intentions. Prior to delving into the ensuing narrative, I'd like to highlight a significant sponsor for today's video. We're talking about Aura, an advanced online digital security service that plays an indispensable role. This service empowers you to scan and obliterate your personal data from a variety of online sources, including scam hubs, the dark web, and data brokers. These entities capitalize on your private information, underscoring the urgency of withdrawing your data from their clutches. The process is made seamless with Aura's free trial. Upon registering, I promptly had Aura scan and eliminate my data with minimal effort. They swiftly alerted me to numerous instances across the web where my personal information, such as full name, phone number, and address, was detected. This is information I would have remained oblivious to without Aura. What's more, Aura continually monitors my data, offering instantaneous alerts about emerging concerns and expediting swift resolutions. They'd also provide an option to encrypt your home Wi-Fi, bolstering the security of all connected devices. In the current landscape, personal identity theft sadly impacts a substantial number of U.S. residents, leading to significant financial setbacks. Aura allows you to harbor utmost confidence in your security and preventive measures. To embark on a completely free 14-day trial, visit aura.com/whispered or scan the provided QR code. During this trial period, you can assess if your personal data has been compromised, eliminate it from several prominent platforms, and vigilantly oversee your personal identity. I strongly recommend capitalizing on this complimentary trial to ascertain any data breaches and fortify your identity safety. Once again, heartfelt appreciation to Aura for sponsoring this video and ensuring the safeguarding of our personal data. Now, permit me to recount a personal anecdote involving my camping experience in Illinois. The state I reside in is known for its flat terrain and somewhat limited hiking and camping opportunities, especially in terms of scenic vistas. Despite this, I decided to undertake my inaugural camping trip this year, selecting a secluded forest due to its level ground and a seemingly straightforward trail leading to a small pond. I envisioned a modest yet pleasing sight. The hike was relatively short, spanning just under an hour, but the pond at the end left much to be desired. It proved to be disappointingly small, surrounded by marshy environs. As a result, I had to set up my tent deeper into the forest, where the ground remained dry. After an hour or so of camping, boredom started to creep in, prompting me to explore the vicinity of the pond. While traversing to the opposite side, I encountered a lack of distinctive features or landmarks. Although the forest exuded a tranquil and picturesque aura, it seemed monotonous, lacking unique attributes. Returning to my camp as the sun gradually set, I'd observed the light across the pond. It happened to be positioned where I had ventured before, among the trees. The notion of stumbling upon a stranger or even a group of strangers in the forest mingled with my curiosity, although the limited camping trails in the vicinity made such an encounter plausible. I carried on with my evening undertakings, intermittently glancing across the pond as darkness enveloped the surroundings. The light, initially misconstrued as a campfire, gained clarity, revealing itself to be a flashlight or some kind of artificial illuminating device. An hour later, out of the corner of my eye, I witnessed the light gradually waning, accompanied by a few flickers until it vanished. This development sent a shiver down my spine, leaving me bewildered and unsure of its significance. Surprisingly, the remainder of the night unfolded in silence, and I slumbered undisturbed. With the break of dawn, I'd readied myself for further exploration, the memory of the light still occupying my thoughts as I yearned to unravel its origins. I retraced my steps, reaching the opposite side of the pond, where the light had emanated, meticulously scouring the area for clues. It didn't take long for me to stumble upon the source, a sturdy flashlight resting in the grass. Despite its batteries being depleted, the device appeared relatively new, devoid of noticeable scratches or signs of wear. A thorough examination yielded no other indications of human presence. After contemplation, I chose to leave the flashlight where I found it and started making my way back to camp. However, my progress came to an abrupt halt when I discerned figures across the pond. Two grown men were standing by my fire pit in the heart of my camp, joined by another individual who emerged from the trees. From my vantage point, I could discern their outlines but little else. Overwhelmed by fear, I refrained from raising my voice or making any sudden movements, opting instead to quietly observe their actions. The intruders explored my camp, rifling through my belongings. At one point, one of them suddenly turned, directing their gaze toward the pond, directly at me. Our eyes locked momentarily, sending a shiver down my spine. The man left the camp, striding into the trees. While momentarily losing sight of him, I caught a glimpse of his figure as he swiftly moved through the forest. Driven by panic, I fled deeper into the woods, distancing myself from the pond. While the odds of them tracking me down seemed slim, fear clouded my judgment, and I sprinted for about 15 minutes before finally stopping, orienting myself toward the general direction of my car. Thankfully, I managed to reach safety, though I had lost all of my belongings. In short, nothing of note transpired afterward. I reported the incident to the police, but regrettably, it led to no significant outcomes. Even now, the recollection of that flashlight continues to haunt me. Was it linked to those men, or did it belong to an entirely different party? I cling to the hope that the flashlight was merely a ploy, used to lure me away from my campsite. However, if that were the case, why did they pursue me afterward? I try to convince myself that it was solely a robbery without further nefarious intentions. Yet deep down, I recognize that I narrowly escaped that forest with my life hanging in the balance. The previous year marked a significant turning point in my camping escapades. Following a series of solo camping expeditions to familiar locations, I began feeling an urge to explore uncharted territories. This desire led me to choose the 4-mile camping trail for a particular expedition. It was a path I had never traversed before. Setting out from a remote starting point, a 2-hour drive from my home, I immediately noticed that the trail wasn't providing the expected level of enjoyment. The presence of damp and muddy sections put a damper on my spirits. Despite this, I persisted, carefully navigating around these obstacles. After some time, around 45 minutes into the hike, something caught my eye on the edge of the trail, an old tent with visible tiers. Upon closer inspection, I realized it was abandoned, showing no signs of intentional damage. Instead, the elements had clearly taken their toll, leaving the tent in a deteriorated state. I explored the vicinity, both inside and around the tent, but to my surprise, there were no other noteworthy findings. This puzzled me as I had anticipated stumbling upon a collection of abandoned belongings. Yet, aside from the tent, there were no remnants to be found. After pondering this mystery for a short while, I continued my trek for the remaining hour and a half of the trail. To my growing unease, I came across scattered items, camping and hiking gear, strewn along the 4-mile trail. The sight of these abandoned possessions, concentrated in this specific area, deeply unsettled me. It was evident that this wasn't an accidental occurrence. It seemed deliberate, as if someone had intentionally left everything behind. When I reached the trail's end, I set up my tent at a safe distance, cautious due to the encroaching darkness. Despite a slight sense of unease, I managed to sleep peacefully through the night without any disturbances. The next morning before sunrise, I exited my tent and immediately sensed something amiss in the air. I swiftly turned around and discovered a man standing just a few feet away on the other side of my campsite. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in filthy attire, with a dirt-smudged face. His vacant stare left me frozen in astonishment and fear. In a chilling, hushed tone, he spoke a single word. Instinctively, I nodded, my mind reeling from shock, repeating the word, "okay," over and over. However, His response was far from reassuring. He suddenly lunged towards me, causing me to stumble backward in alarm. Gathering my wits, I managed to utter the word "leave" as I scrambled to my feet and fled, leaving all my belongings behind. Glancing back briefly, I saw the man rummaging through my backpack like a curious animal. I sprinted as fast as I could until I reached my vehicle, thankful that my phone and keys were in my pocket. I finally got cell reception and called emergency services. It turned out that a similar incident had happened in the past, although it had been kept from the media. The abandoned tent and belongings I had discovered belonged to this undisclosed individual. Discussions with the authorities led to a small search party of officers. Unfortunately, they found no trace of the man along the trail. However, they did recover most of my belongings, scattered close to my campsite as if they were discarded. Since then, the case has gotten cold, much like its predecessor. The lingering question that continues to haunt me is the peculiar behavior of the man. Why would he scatter everything in the forest without any intention of using a single item?